Howdy and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. I am Will Stone. He is Chase Caldwell. And I've got
Cock-a-doodle-doo, folks.
cock-a-doodle-doo, folks. I've got the 12men.com/sports/football/schedule pulled up on my laptop here, and it's 16 days, 15 hours, 23 minutes, and 15 seconds until kickoff.
Nice.
How is things in Waxahachie, Chase?
Stormy right now, which is good.
Yeah.
I can cut my sprinklers off tomorrow morning and just let it get the natural rain.
That's such a great feeling.
Yeah, I got my window open right now, just watching the lightning, which is pretty intense at the moment. So, yeah.
Well, we're going to keep our fingers crossed that our feed remains intact and don't have any technical difficulties. So,
yeah. If we do, we'll be back.
We will be back.
Hopefully right back.
Yeah. We are getting in a full episode tonight. And it doesn't matter what the conditions are. So, well, yeah, I thought we did a pretty good job breaking down those that first stretch of 6 games on the A&M schedule, leading into the bye week, and then starting back up, still on the road. So there's like a 5-week stretch where they're not at Kyle Field, and that first game after the bye is at South Carolina. Before we get into that, I did have a question for you, and
Okay.
I didn't prep you for this, so it's going to be off the cuff.
Off the cuff. We'll do it live.
So back when you were a manager, did those teams like all seem pretty like close to each other and like tight knit, like all the guys were kind of like, friends and like was it like a really close knit group?
Yeah, I don't know. I would say it's like any group of 100 and some odd guys, right?
That are forced to be together for hours.
Yeah, like there was the. I would say collectively, were they a team? Yeah, like were they a group? Were they all friends? Did they all kind of rag on each other from time to time? Yes. Was there some infighting between some of them at times, especially during fall camp, whenever tensions were high and testosterone's high, and they spend every waking moment together? Yes, there was some of that. But I mean, we just as humans have a natural tendency to pair ourselves off in groups, and so I would say there would be that, like there's always groups of friends, if that makes sense. But I would say collectively, yeah. I can't think of a time where I was like, everybody always talks about is there trouble in the locker room and that kind of thing. Right. I can't think of times where there was like a big separation. I would say in 2013, it seemed like there was a little bit of disgruntledness between the offense and defense, which was kind of more led by Johnny and the like, hey, we, defense, we need y'all to do something,
Yeah.
But of course there was the whole kabobble with Kyler and Kyle.
Quarterbacks, yeah.
Yeah, but most times if you ever saw fights between guys, it was between guys that were like roommates and like best friends, and they were, out there on the field together and going against each other, and then they get in a fight,
yeah.
That was about the only times that you ever saw like a real argument or fight or whatever.
Right.
Why do you ask?
I'll tell you the reason I ask. So I've been listening to these TexAgs Stacked interviews, and if you're not a member of TexAgs, you ought to be. You ought to be a Stacked member because they've been doing player interviews and they've been fantastic. But a common theme is like, and it may just be because like we typically don't have that kind of access to the players. We don't get to hear them, talk outside of their assigned media days.
Mm-hmm.
But they all sound like, well, I think first of all, it sounds like the leadership is at it's in a better place than maybe it's been in some past years, which I think is kind of an underrated aspect. Like you can be a super talented team, but if there's no leadership, there's no accountability, and I think things can fall apart when you hit adversity.
Mhm.
But the other thing, like, it just seems like a really close group, like, and maybe that's just how all football teams are. Like I remember, obviously a long time ago in high school playing, like, that's who you hang out with, like after practice or like out of school, like, and in
Mhm.
college, like like the football team is all roommates together, so it only makes sense they'd be tight knit. But
Yeah.
it's just one thing that kind of stood out, and I think the eternal optimist in me is starting to buy in a little bit on how good this team can be, and maybe I'm just trying to it's like confirmation bias in my own mind, like, oh, like they're more
Look,
tight
they're
knit than
closer
ever.
than
Yeah,
normal. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Or there's more leadership than ever, and like this is going to be the year. But it's probably just the fan and the optimist in me.
Uh, Total speculation here because I do like the qualitative nature of that instead of quantitative. Like you can't really measure that, right?
Right,
But if you I wouldn't be totally shocked if somebody were to tell me that the team or teams under Jimbo are closer and more of a tight knit group than what they were under Sumlin. And I don't
right,
mean that disrespectfully towards Sumlin or any of his coaching staff that he had while he was there, because I think we had some great coaches there, but there was at least a mentality. If I had to put like a name on it or really flesh it out, I would say there was it was a kind of everybody do what you want to kind of thing. And so the collective groups that kind of came together were just natural from guys spending that amount of time together.
right.
Where I could see maybe a Jimbo led team, and this is just speculation, just based on kind of making this up based on what I've observed. Um, there might be more of the camaraderie aspect of we're all in it together. Let's because he's big on talking about team, 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 team.
Yeah,
A great example of this, someone's biggest thing that he would always say, which is very coach speaky, but it was do your job, do your job, you know, do your job, and if everybody does their job, then you're here. Versus Jimbo's like more of like, um, what's some of his like,
like grit, or
yeah,
like his whole like toughness, effort, discipline, pride, grit.
yeah, but like kind of the team aspect of, like get out there and you're not, who cares if you don't have the most touches this game
Yeah,
if the team won, like I get that gist from him. And ultimately, like someone saying do your job was based on if everybody does their job, then we're a solid team.
right.
But philosophically, it could be argued that, well, if you're just doing your job, you're just worried about yourself,
It's more
and then
based on the individual.
then you can blame somebody else of, well, I was doing my job, you didn't do yours,
Yeah, that's true.
and philosophically, I guess you could say that. But
Right.
here we're like really digging into something that you can't measure anyways, so we don't know whether we would be right or
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say I don't think you're remiss by maybe buying into that they seem to be closer. Like
Yeah.
the perfect example was when they went and picked um, A Chain off the ground whenever he
Yeah.
fumbled it. Like to me, that was like a really cool moment of, hey, get up, we got you. And then the defense comes running over, hey, we got you. You've been on teams before. I've been on teams before. We would probably all do that for our teammates. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's not abnormal. You wouldn't think, but there was a lot of egos during my time as a student that were around that you had to kind of deal with.
Right.
I'm sure there's still egos right now,
Yeah.
but I guess I would have more confidence in Jimbo mitigating an ego than I would, Sumlin maybe.
Right.
But
it's just different, like different coaching
Yeah.
styles, and obviously, I think that Jimbo's coaching style has been pretty successful. So
Yeah.
um,
I've been so busy as of late that I haven't really gotten to watch any of the stacked stuff. So I really
um,
need to get on and start watching some of that because I've heard great things about it. I just haven't really watched
when
any of it.
and there's so many of them now. Like I bet they've had a third of the team on there.
Well, and that's kind of why I want to like go back and like binge watch all of
Yeah,
them. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Heck,
Just
we
get
might just put
excited.
those on this weekend. Just have them going in the background the whole weekend.
That's a great idea. We absolutely should do that. I 100% support
Because
that.
there's definitely enough content to go like several hours of just stacked interviews. But
Yeah, I'm
um,
all for that.
I think
So I might watch those and be like, there's there's a lot of me that thinks I would watch those and be like, oh yeah, that's pretty much how it was when we were there. But then there's a lot of me that also thinks I could watch it and be like, yeah, they do seem like really tight knit. So
well, and it's the tight knit, and like not that past teams haven't cared, because they certainly have, but this team like gives a damn. Like they're really into like, hey, like, this is serious business. Like we need to, go win a championship this season. Like we don't
mhm,
want to wait until next year, like everyone tells us to. Like, oh, like you might be good this year, but next year's really your year. Like they're not having any of that. So
mhm,
I think it's that, and I think one thing is I think teams like, that saying like hard times produce like good leaders, and blah blah blah. Like tough seasons, I feel like after a tough season, like if Bama doesn't win the championship, like their leadership the next season is usually pretty good, and they
mhm.
usually ended up winning it that year. Like this could be an example where we went 8-4, didn't have the season we wanted, and that kind of was a reality check. Like, hey, like we need to do better and be better, and maybe they're just more focused because of the rough season last year, and maybe that's produced more leaders like because of that.
Yeah, and I think some of the rat poison that's out there about A&M this past off season has probably done a bit of that as well because uh, every team would like to gloat and say, "Oh no, we don't listen to outside noise." That's not true. Not in
Yeah,
social media days. Like you see it, and so I think that would light a fire under me. If I
right,
was on the team and um, our best season in the SEC arguably was 2012, and that came from an off season of everybody talking about how terrible we were going to be.
exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, it's it. I know sports people, especially people who played sports, who tried to create that mentality in themselves. They like to think, okay, no, that doesn't outside noise doesn't affect. It does. It has an absolute effect, especially today. So, um, I I I think there's a bit of a chip on our shoulder, um, to prove various things. We proved ourselves in 2020, and yet everybody wants to write us off. And we knew midway through that whole thing, this is going to be a great season, and everybody's going to be like, "Oh yeah, but that was the COVID year." So, and what are they doing now? Oh well, yeah, y'all still haven't won 10 games in a season. Oh,
Well, yeah, and they call it like they just kind of throw it out as like, oh, it was a COVID year, like it's an anomaly, it doesn't count,
right,
and it's so dumb because had COVID not happened, A&M's probably like 11-2 at the worst. Like our schedule got tougher because of COVID, because
right,
you added Florida and Tennessee, and there were no cupcake games, and
yeah.
if we had stuck with the original schedule, you're probably winning 10 at a minimum, maybe 11, or with a bowl game maybe 12. So
Well, and I think
um,
to me, it seems like we've heard more of that this past year than we did last year.
yeah,
Like we heard more of that in 20 or like between last season and this season than I remember hearing between COVID and last season.
and I'm
Like,
not sure if you've seen this on Twitter or not, but like on August 4th, it was 8-4, and like not just Longhorn fans, but like other fan bases were like taking shots at A&M, like, oh, it's A&M day, it's 8-4, blah blah blah, and I'm like, like we lost one game 2 seasons ago. We won the Orange Bowl.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get last year wasn't what we wanted it to be, and I think we'd all agree with that. But I think you're right. That season gets completely ignored just because it was COVID.
Yeah, but I think it was more of they didn't want to talk that last year because they weren't sure how good we were actually going to be.
Exactly.
And then then when we had an 8-4 year, it's like, oh, yep, classic A&M. Y'all can't even win 10 games in a season.
Yeah.
So
I do want to put Alante's question up here. He says, how much is the Nick versus Jimbo part of the offseason going to spill over to the game? And I think part of it will. I think their players, are just as aware of this as our players are. What I think it'll make for a damn good football game. Like,
absolutely.
I don't think they're going to kick our ass. I don't think we're going to kick their ass. I think both teams are just going to show up in full force and try to play their best, and it's going to make for great football. And I'm very excited about that.
I think that it will. I think of any off-season stuff that has ever happened, I think that is probably the most or the biggest thing that I've ever seen that I would expect to impact the season. So I do think that will have an impact primarily on our players on that game. And the reason why is because they were insulted by a guy who probably recruited almost every single one of them.
Yeah.
And they're insulted, called out, and outside of Jimbo, when you just say, oh well, A&M bought all these guys, that's insulting. If you're one of those guys that Nick Saban was sitting in your living room 6 months ago telling your parents that he could turn you into a man.
If you're Anthony Lucas,
yeah,
or someone like that,
yeah,
who came down to the wire and picked us on signing day,
and so imagine if I'm a 5-star recruit, or this is how I'm imagining it, and all these coaches keep coming and sitting down in my living room promising my mom a bill of goods about how they're going to take care of me and they're going to provide a good life for me and all that kind of stuff. And I'm torn between A&M and Bama. End up going with A&M, and still probably torn. There's no way that you can make that decision not still be like a little bit torn of, did I make the right decision? That would be such a hard decision to make. And then not even 6 months later, just a few months later, here's the same guy that was just promising my mom that he was gonna, really turn me into a man.
mm-hmm.
And he's saying that somebody bought me. That would not only make me mad because he insulted me, but it would just make him out to be a liar to me,
Yeah.
And so then that would infuriate me to where I would want to prove something.
Yeah.
And that can be a double-edged sword though, because you can of mice and minute, and you're Lenny and you're squeezing so tight on that mouse that you kill it because you want to prove something, so you get off of your game, right? But at the same time, it can really vault you to play your best game ever, because if there's any game that you want to win, it's against this coach. So it'd be one thing if it was players that said that, but being that it was Nick Saban, who the czar of college football, who said that about me, that would piss me off, and that would make me want to play up to that level, right? So yeah. I think absolutely. I think it's a great question. I think it will. Are we going to talk about it between now and then, or are any of our players going to talk about it? No. When that game comes up, is every question leading up to it, is every ESPN, or sports documentarian going to say something about it? Absolutely. Is every question going to be in the press conference? Absolutely. Are they going to coach speak it and say, we're not focused on that, we're not worried about that, that's behind us? Yep. Is that true? No. They're going to say that all day long. Like, no, that's in the past. I said what we said. We're done. Let's not talk about it anymore. And then
Yeah.
they're going to go in the locker room. We're going to be like, you show him what we bought today,
Yeah.
and then that's that. So
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that. It's got to be like you can't just get too fired up about it and too angry and go out there and play, kind of like erratic. Like it's got to be a controlled, passion, a controlled fire. Like make that be the spark that makes you want to go out there and play the best game you've ever played. And
right.
I think of guys like Anthony Lucas, like Evan Stewart, like these freshmen that are going to, make a more immediate impact that especially by that game, that's game 6. Like there's a handful of these guys that are going to be getting a lot of reps. And, like those two guys, I think of, Denver Harris, like those big name guys that Nick Saban did have in-home visits with that, tried his damnedest to get them to come to Alabama and couldn't do it. So yeah, like that's a great comment. We didn't plan to go there today, but I'm glad we did. I'm even more fired up than I was when we started this episode. So
right. Yeah, me too.
That's a good place for us to jump off into the back half. And, these last 6 games of the season after the bye week, they're not easy, but it definitely feels easier than the first 6. I think we expressed that already, but it's 4 home games. There's no back-to-back away games. In fact, each away game has 2 home games in between it. So I think that's a big plus. And also, like I think this schedule features some very, very good quarterbacks at the college level, and they're really all in the front. Like there's some guys there's some guys on this back half that are dangerous, like Spencer Rattler, obviously. Like he's played a lot of ball. And Anthony Richardson at Florida. But when it comes to
Calzada though at Auburn,
Zach Calzada, he beat Alabama.
Yeah.
Like it's just difficult enough to where like someone can catch you sleeping, and you can't get caught sleeping on this back half.
No, you can't. And I mean, I think our season success is predicated on our success of the front 6, because if you were to come out of that 6-0, why would we sleep?
Right.
We're on the cusp of what we're shooting for, and it's just going to progressively get easier. And so there's no sense in sleeping and letting that happen. If you come out of it 5-1, I would think it would be more likely that you might get caught sleeping a time or two. If you come out of it 4-2, well, it's probably going to be even more likely, because some of the motivation is gone. There's that feeling of, dang it, there goes the season.
Right.
And so that's what you always hate about Bama being mid-year, because it can really deflate a season. But I think Jimbo's big thing is they remember November.
Right.
Well, we play Florida at Auburn, UMass, and LSU. Arguably, those could be 4 of our easiest games. And I hate to say that because I don't want to doubt these teams are good teams. We don't really know what to expect. I'm not expecting a ton out of LSU, but we don't know what to expect from them. I'm not expecting hardly anything out of Auburn, but they're going to have Calzada on that team. He may very well be starting by that point. I don't know. I don't know what Brian Harsin's going to be like, right? Like it's. They played us very tough last year.
Yeah,
it was a dogfight last year, and a great game. I'm hoping for a great game again, but it's not an easy game. Florida, Anthony Richardson is one that a lot of people have high hopes for. So he could very well be as good as advertised. So these aren't these aren't gimme games by any means. It never will be in the SEC
for sure.
but yeah, you would like to see a Vanderbilt, on there.
Yeah, no kidding.
But we really don't have one. I mean, the closest we would have to that is Auburn, and I don't think they're going to fall to that far down. So it's going to be a tough stretch no matter what.
Yeah.
But it's if you had to compare that to the front half of the schedule, I think by far that's the easier one.
Yeah.
And I'm not doubting those teams, but I just that Miami, Arkansas, Mississippi State, and Alabama is just that's a tough grind right there.
Yeah.
And you don't have that tough of a grind, at least not back to back to back, in back half. So
yeah, I think those first six games are going to define who this team is, and this team's going to tell us who they are in those 6 games. And I think they're all winnable. Yeah, I'm kind of with Pierce here on his comment of 10-2. I think that's kind of been our thought as well all offseason. Like, hey, 10-2, like 10-2 at minimum. You can't, you shouldn't go 9-3 with this level of talent, unless you just get incredibly unlucky or have a rash of injuries. And I feel like we need that 10 in the win column in the regular season to kind of keep this momentum going. And not that 9-3 is going to derail the entire thing, but it just doesn't feel quite as good. Like
no,
there's something about getting 10 wins in the regular season that honestly, it hasn't happened at A&M a lot in the past couple decades. So it's an important thing. But
I often say expectations and expectations, right?
Right.
You've heard my double definition there. My expectation is 10-2. My expectation is 11-1. I actually think we'll go 11-1 this year. But I expect us to at least go 10-2. We've got to have that 10-win season.
Right.
And we've got the talent this year. There's no reason why we shouldn't.
Yeah. So let's start getting into this game by game a little bit. So,
okay.
To lay it all out, this back 6 is you play Alabama, you get a bye week. You get to recover, recoup. Hopefully we've had a lot of success up to that point, but after the bye week, we go to South Carolina. Our bitterest of rivals. Then we're home against Ole Miss, home against Florida, at Auburn, home against UMass, home against LSU, maroon out game, get revenge for next year or for last year, excuse me. But at South Carolina, this is when these two teams get together, just throw those records out because this is a big time college football rivalry, and you just can't overlook that. Even though we've won all the games that we played between each other, you can't overlook South Carolina.
Everybody knows that the Texas A&M South Carolina rivalry is the biggest rivalry in college football.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that this back half is straddled by 2 rivalry games. It starts with South Carolina, ends with LSU.
Right.
Biggest rivalry games in the nation by far. But South Carolina, they played some good football last year that I was mildly impressed with.
We beat the crap out of them in our game, and then after that they were really good. I don't know why they were good, but they were. They beat Auburn. They crushed North Carolina in their bowl game.
Yeah, they've had a lot of excitement surrounding their program this offseason too. Their video production people have been great. They've gone viral a couple different times with their Full House video that they did.
Hey, I'll be honest. When you sent me the video about Cock-a-doodle-doo, I thought it was going to be a South Carolina hype video.
I don't even know what that was. It was a Twitter account called What was it called?
Old Trump videos or something.
Yeah, random old Trump videos or something. And he goes, "Cock-a-doodle-doo, folks. My name's Donald Trump." Like, if you haven't seen the video, go watch it. That's what I was referencing earlier. But yeah, so South Carolina. Um, I love that game after the Alabama game. Personally, I think that's um, a great palate cleanser. We're going to be banged up coming out of that stretch following Bama. I said last time that we really can lay it all out on the field at Bama, and then we got 2 weeks to prepare for South Carolina. So I like that. I also like something that we haven't really mentioned. It's kind of a well, I'll say this going into the Ole Miss. So what other points do you have about South Carolina?
So I'll kind of do what I did last week and say something nice about them and something not so nice about them.
Mhm.
Obviously, like the excitement is, I think that's a real thing. Like they're very energized right now. Shane Beamer, the head coach over there, walked into a not so great situation, and to make a bowl game, just to make a bowl game in his first year, and then win that bowl game, who was also against a team that you battle for recruits in North Carolina. That was a great first season for them, and
Mhm.
they've got some nice recruits. Obviously, maybe the biggest recruit they got was in the transfer portal with Spencer Rattler. Their quarterback situation stunk last year, like maybe one of the worst that I've ever seen. They played a receiver at quarterback in their bowl game, I think. But Spencer Rattler, like say what you will about him, but he's a legit college quarterback. Like
Mhm.
he's not a bad player by any means. So that's my something nice, and I think they've got a couple other guys like their tight ends. I think he's a good player. Can't think of his name. And they have a guy or two on defense who are like all SEC kind of candidates. But when, I think the flip side of that is like my negative for them is when it comes to just the overall level of talent and depth, they just don't have the horses that A&M does. And I think they have some nice tight ends. Like they got Stogner from Oklahoma to transfer over there, and he's a good player. But in terms of like their offensive skill and even their trenches as a whole, I just don't think it's gonna compare to what A&M can do.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think Spencer's going to be a good quarterback. He's got history with Shane Beamer, and I think he'll do really well for South Carolina. But I don't think they have all the tools yet to make it happen against us, and they might be a real threat next year
Hmm.
on that. But I of all of the SEC games, at least, this is the one I feel most comfortable about. I might change my tune as the year goes on, but just going into the year, I think that's one that I'm least concerned with. Um, so I'll say what I was about to say and segue us now into Ole Miss. Um, this sets up very similarly to our 2012 season. So in 2012, we had that stretch of away games, and it was like we were away a lot in a row, and it was because we had a reschedule on the Louisiana Tech game. Eh, When you look at our schedule right now, we play Miami September 17th, and we don't play in Kyle Field until October 29th again.
Hmm.
So we go 5 weeks, really 6 weeks in between the two, where we're not at Kyle Field. So going back to what we were talking about, or the theme earlier of motivation. How do you motivate a team if we lose against Bama or if we lose against Arkansas? How do you motivate a team on various things? Well, you've got some areas here where, yeah, if we beat Arkansas, we beat Mississippi State, and let's say we beat Bama. Well, hey, let's finish this road stretch. Let's beat South Carolina. Let's go home. And then whenever you go flow into Ole Miss, it's like, hey, we're home, and they've been waiting for us to come back, get out there and show them we're back.
Yeah, and if it's
And
that scenario you lined out, it's coming home to a home crowd as the number one team in the country, likely.
Right, and you've gotten through showing Bama who's boss, in this scenario, right? Of you showed them what's up. You won the Saban versus Jimbo argument on the field, and then now you got mini Saban coming to Kyle Field, and you can beat him up too, and he can say, "Oh yeah, well I'm, you know, get your popcorn ready." Hopefully, he says it again, and we'll do the same thing Bama did to him last year.
Oh, you hope so.
So Ole Miss is going to be a threat as long as Lane Kiffin's there. I mean, they do have some tools, but that's one game that I really hope that we win. That's one thing I think Kyle Field will really get loud for, because number one, it'll seem like a whole off season since we've been there, during that 6-week stretch, and then it's Lane Kiffin who's talked a lot of trash about us this offseason, and we'll have something to prove on the field too. And I think a lot of the Aggie fan base will be raring to go to make it loud in there,
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing about the Aggie fan base that I've learned, and like this is like even your fan that doesn't read Texags or is super plugged in. They hate losing to the Mississippi schools. They freaking hate it. It's valid. We shouldn't lose to those teams. We consistently bring in much more talent than they do, and they have good players. I'm not going to doubt them, and they have good coaches, but it just shouldn't happen at the rate that it has happened, and that's why you want like A&M fans want to beat Mississippi State so bad. They want to beat Ole Miss so bad, because if you can take care of that and your only loss is Alabama, then that's a season that fans can live with.
Mm-hmm.
If you go 8-4, lose to both of them, as well as Arkansas and LSU, that's a season that they can't really live with, and it's not really acceptable. So Ole Miss, great year for them last year. It was outstanding. It was peak Lane Kiffin. Like that's what he wants to do with a team, and not that not that he maxed it out last year, but it was really ideal for him. He had a fourth-year quarterback in Matt Corral who was outstanding. Ended up getting drafted, and had DJ Durkin manning his defense, who's now at A&M, who we're a big fan of, and they were just it all clicked for him. And in the offseason, for whatever reason, his whole coaching staff left. I think he's like, is that right? He's the only guy left from the staff last year. Like,
is that right?
I think it is.
Really?
I know he definitely lost both coordinators and like multiple position coaches. He even hired his own brother, and then he left like a month later.
Wow.
So that it may mean nothing. It may mean something. I don't really know, but things like that made me say, is this is this dysfunctional over there? And maybe parts of it are, but I think on the field, Kiffin dubbed himself the portal king or the transfer king or whatever instead of Tiger King. He made like a Tiger King shirt with his face on it. It said Portal King, which is peak Kiffin. But
yeah,
they did well in the portal, and I think a couple of those guys are really going to pan out. Specifically, Zach Evans at running back and Michael Trigg, the tight end. I think both of them are very good players. What the downside is for them, I think, my negative for them is I don't think they have a quarterback. And what frustrates me about national media is they cling to names and they don't really evaluate the player. They're just like, oh, this is a name that other people think is good, so I'm going to think they're good too, and I'm going to talk about that. And if you go back to January, February, every podcast in America did a show. Every college football podcast in America did a show about Jackson Dart going from USC to Ole Miss. They're like, oh my gosh, like this is such a great move. Ole Miss won't miss a beat, losing Corral, and then spring football comes around and Jackson Dart kind of stunk. And maybe he wasn't this can't miss quarterback. And I'm not saying he's going to be bad, but maybe he's picked it up in fall camp. Maybe he's going to be really good. But Matt Corral was like the perfect quarterback for that offense, and it's going to be a step back at that position. I think that holds them back this year.
Yeah, I think so too. I think anytime you have changes like that, it's going to our change at quarterback is going to have some ill effects at that position, no matter what. Even if it's even if we end up by the end of year having a great quarterback, it's gonna have its own kinks. It's always going to, um, and so yeah, I'm with you on Aggie fans just don't want to lose to the Mississippi schools. That's how I feel anytime I look at Ole Miss's logo. I'm like, I just don't want to lose to them. We ought to beat them. We don't need to be at their level. We need to be the level above with the talent that we have. So,
Right.
I mean, that's just, and I'm going to say that about just about every team this year. Um, Florida. Florida is an interesting one to me, because I'm curious to see. I'm curious to see what kind of team they are this year. I don't have high expectations for them. I don't think like somebody. I saw a video of some Florida fans saying that Anthony Richardson will be the best quarterback that they've ever had in Florida history or something like that, and I'm like, you might want to slow down there a bit.
Yeah, I think they have 3 Heisman-winning quarterbacks that
Right, like,
they've had in their history.
it'd be one thing if somebody said that about Vanderbilt's quarterback, like, okay,
Right.
yeah, that might the case can be made for that, but for Florida, like, you've got a history there, like, you can't really say that, so, um, curious to see what the coaching staff does, with the team, and, um, I really don't have much of an opinion on Florida just because they're a bit of an unknown to me,
Yeah.
um So, what are your thoughts? Because I'm sure you've done a little bit more research on that than I have.
Well, it's funny because, you know, I've gone to pretty much each of our opponents' message boards at some point this offseason just to get a feel for, like, how they're feeling about their team, like, who they lost from last year, who's coming back, just kinda checking the vibe of each team's, message boards, and I've gotta say, I've researched Florida, I've looked into them, and I just don't have anything to say about them. Like, there's just, like, I guess I'll talk about Anthony Richardson, who recently, like, he had the nickname AR-15. He recently told people to stop calling him that. So I'll just call him Anthony Richardson, or just AR.
Yeah.
Um, that's his initials. But uh, he's extremely gifted with physical tools. He's a big guy. He's like 6'3", 230 pounds, extremely fast, incredible arm strength. But all those things don't really make a good quarterback by themselves. He could be very, very good
Mhm.
if, the middle side clicks, and it might, but we just haven't seen it yet. And he's a very high ceiling player. And honestly, like, if I had to give a pro for them, it's probably just the fact that they have him on their team. They, like,
Mhm.
if he works out, they could be formidable. Uh, the downside for them is I just don't think the rest of their team is very good. Um, their offensive line is okay. Not really many difference makers there. They don't have a lot of difference makers on their defensive line or their linebackers or their secondary, or their skill spots. Like, I think they have a decent running back or two, but they don't really have great receivers from what I can tell. And it, it's I can't get a feel for them. I mean, like, I've tried to research them, and I don't know what they are. So
Yeah.
I'm going to have to see them in live action before I have any kind of real opinion on them. But if I'm calling it today, I think A&M can win that game, and it could be comfortable.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I had to call it today if I had to call it today, I'm going A&M over that, but more of if I had to kinda nitpick what I do know about Florida, I do know that in recent years, they've lost a lot of their good players. They've struggled at various times in recruiting or, um, just had a lot of off the field issues that to me, it screams a team that's going to have 2 or 3 years of rebuilding. So, Pierce has a good question. I'm going to put that one up here. I'll let you answer this one, Will.
Yeah, Pierce asked, who are you more worried about between Miami and Florida? Well, they're both at home. I think I'd have to say it's easily Miami for me.
Me too.
Their quarterback is much more proven. He's a really good player. Both teams, took a lot of transfers, and honestly, I think both sets of skill players are pretty non-threatening. So it's kind of a wash, but with Miami being earlier in the season, and maybe we're still trying to figure some things out against a really good quarterback, I'd have to go with them over Florida right now.
That would be the exact reasoning for me, just because I just got through saying I don't just know a ton about Florida at this moment in time. Miami is who I'm most worried about, because I also don't just know a whole lot about our team and what it's going to look like.
Right.
So Miami's going to be our first big game out of the gate, and there's going to be some mistakes that are made, and they're a good enough team that they could capitalize on those mistakes. I don't expect us to have as many mistakes the first game in November, and
Right.
so I think we're going to play a lot more refined football against Florida, which means that they've got to be a lot better of a team than Miami is for me to be more worried about them than Miami, and I just don't see that.
Yeah.
If I had to put them head to head, I like the two teams. If Miami and Florida were playing, I don't know who I would pick.
Yeah. I
I
think.
would probably still pick Miami at this point, but
Yeah.
it's not a matter of do I think Miami is a better team than Florida. I think
Right.
the way they set up on our schedule, and I would give them a slight edge in terms of thinking that they are a better team. That's what it really comes down to.
Yeah. Yeah, and like they definitely haven't recruited to the standard of Florida. That's kind of the primary reason that Mullen got fired, was his lack of recruiting, and so they won't have the talent of a typical Florida team. Definitely not near as talented as the one that came to Kyle Field in 2020. Um, the last thing I'll say about them is I really like their coach Billy Napier. I think that was a really good hire. I think like he's starting to recruit really well, and I think in the future they could be a really good team. But as far as this year and this schedule, I'm not that scared of them at this point.
Yeah. Let's move on to Auburn,
Or Eagles.
because that one's gonna be a fun one. Right now, I would say I think we win that game. But when you look at how they played against us last year, they put up a good fight at our home stadium. Now we're at theirs. Of course, this is we normally have better luck at theirs than we do at ours.
It used to be that, right?
History.
Like,
Yeah, it used to be we would always win at each other's stadiums.
right.
But they just, I don't know, they seem like an amalgam of a team. Like there's just a lot of just kind of pasted together things about their team. I'm not just
Right.
real strong on their coaching staff. I don't just have a whole lot of faith that this is the Auburn team to be worried about.
Yeah.
But the Calzada factor really plays in, because that dude's a competitor, and I think there's bound to be a little bit of animosity towards A&M from him, and there has to be. I mean, after all of you can SMD, is what he said. So he definitely has that animosity, and I can't blame the guy. He did really well for us, and that's one of the more disappointing things that I've seen about the Aggie fan base, was how we treated Calzada, and I'm saying we because I kind of was that way too. I was pretty down on him, and he did some good things for our team. Like, so if I'm him, I'm playing the game of my life in that game.
Yeah, and we all know that in a season, he's got one really, really good game in him, and
Yeah.
he might save it for that one.
Yeah, and if we get the game of his life from Calzada, that worries the crap out of me because we see we've seen what he can do when he's tough, and that dude's tough. So uh, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't at least mildly concerned about Calzada.
Yeah.
Um, I wish him the best. I wish him success.
Oh, for sure.
I wish I could go back to last year and kind of not get so in depth in the aggravation towards him because he really did do good for our team. But
Yeah.
um, that's
It's
probably the biggest fear for me is
yeah.
him.
If you go back to however many months ago that was, where the Auburn boosters tried to run Brian Harsin out of there back in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was like, man, Auburn's going to be trash this year. Like they may go like 3-9. They're going to miss a bowl. They're going to fire him. They already want to fire him. They're just looking for a reason to. The culture's going to fall apart. And I heard something. I think it may have been at SEC Media Days or somewhere around there, to where one take on it was like the culture is actually stronger now at Auburn because the malcontents have been like culled. Like the players that didn't get along are gone, and the players that stayed have all bought in. And maybe that's the case.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say one way or the other, but my pros and cons for them. Pro obviously Tank Bigsby. He's a fantastic running back. Will definitely be in the NFL after this season. Is probably a second round pick at worst. And their defensive line is really, really good. It typically is at Auburn for whatever reason. They do really well at that position. And if you go back to last year, against in the Iron Bowl against Bama with TJ Finley at quarterback with Bo Nix hurt, that Auburn D line was just all over Bryce Young. Like I think the final score was like it was 10-3 for a long time. Like Bama couldn't even get in the end zone, and they finally scored it, tied it up at the end, and then won in overtime. But that D line is still there, so that's a really strong uh, part of their team.
Mm-hmm.
What's not as good is their receivers don't scare me in the slightest, and they lost a lot of their guys on the back end to the NFL draft. Where they were, their secondary was quite good last year. Now most of those guys are gone, so it's kind of an old school SEC team where it's like, strong running game, strong defensive line, try to get into a low score like rock fight, and they're capable of doing that. But if I'm picking today, I'm probably picking them last or next to last in the SEC West.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I'm glad we're not having to do that because that was tough last year to try to do.
Yeah.
But I don't. I'm very confident that we win that game. Like I said, my only fear is Calzada. But to the points you just made, by week 9 on our schedule, I fully expect that our offensive line is going to be playing great football.
Yeah.
So their D line doesn't worry me as much. I know that our defensive line is going to be playing great football by that point in the season. Their offensive line and their running game doesn't worry me at all because we'll shut that down. So what we didn't have last year, we had a World War I situation last year where it was just battle of the trenches, and it was just back and forth, and it was just a hard grind back and forth, and it looked like an old school football game, even like before pads, that old football game. But what we didn't have last year that we do have this year is mobile quarterbacks and some deep threats and some good receiver play.
Some speed.
That where they are going to have to really rely on that running game. We don't have to, I don't think, this year. So especially again by that point in the season. So I'm not worried about that one. I think that one's a win. That one's probably one of the ones I'm most confident about us coming out with a win.
Yeah.
But anything can happen, especially when we're looking this far out. I mean, a lot can change in 3 months' time,
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you what can happen is, or what definitely will not happen is, A&M's not using a sorry, A&M is not losing to UMass. That's
Yeah.
that does not fall within any realm of possibility,
So
and
UMass, yeah, dub.
we've got respect for Sam Houston and for App State. We
Yeah.
don't have it for UMass.
No, sorry. So LSU is going to be an interesting game this year. I'm less worried about LSU than I've ever been going into a season. Um, and I know that I've dogged on LSU a lot this offseason, but I just there's way too many moving parts there. We've got their starting quarterback from last year. They got a new coach. One of their other quarterbacks just walked off the team here recently. Like,
That is so weird to me.
yeah,
But
I'm not sure what happened there, unless he just didn't get the starting job. But
well,
and there
yeah,
could be other things. You could have some sort of rare disease or something like that. You can't ever tell. But LSU is a question mark just as much as Florida is to me. But a question mark in a bad way. Florida is a question mark in I don't think they're good, but maybe they are. LSU
yeah.
is more of like I don't think they're good, and maybe they're a little bit better than I think they are. But I'm not even worried about them, to be quite frank. Like
Yeah.
I think this is a year that we get an easy win over LSU and go into the off season or go into the postseason.
If it were over there, I'd be a lot more worried,
Mm-hmm.
just because I'm not superstitious, or not. I'm not that superstitious, but
You're just a little
uh,
stitious.
I'm slightly stitious, and
Okay, un
it's tough to win
poquito.
over there. It's tough to win in Death Valley, but
Mm-hmm.
it is at home, and I'll say this about LSU this season is they might have the widest range of possible outcomes out of any team in the country. Like them in Texas are kind of similar, although Texas has had some injuries, but
Mm-hmm.
like LSU could legitimately go like 6-6, maybe 5-7, but I think 6-6 is more believable, and like up to like 10-2,
Yeah.
and they could look really really good like right off the bat. They could look flat terrible for
Mm-hmm.
the whole year and struggle to make a ball game. And what there's there's a few things that worry me, like not like really worry me, but just like that I think that caused me to think they might be good is for all the weirdness of Brian Kelly that we've experienced in the off season is like aside from all that, he's a pretty good coach. I
Yeah.
always thought that he caught some flack at Notre Dame for not winning a title, but he didn't have national title talent on his team. Like he did most years, he did the best he could with what he had, and
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, having more talent, at LSU, at least in some spots, he may be weird and whatnot or whatever, but he is still a good coach. And that part, gives me pause on like I have a hard time seeing them be just flat terrible. Like Edo 2020 terrible.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be terrible. Don't get me wrong. I just don't think that they're. I think he's going to have to rebuild a bit,
Yeah.
and I don't. Even some of his best teams at Notre Dame, I wanted to play them every year because I'm like, man, we would beat them.
Hmm.
So whenever I think about it like that, I'm like, yeah, we finally get to.
Right.
So but here's the thing: if we're playing for a 10th or 11th win, I think we win that game
Yeah.
because every Aggie wants it so bad. The team wants it so bad. Jimbo wants it so bad that it's going to be a loud, raucous game, and I expect it to be, you know, similar in that sense to how the 7 overtime game was against LSU, where it's just we're not going to quit. We're just going to keep going, and we're going to figure out a way to win that game.
Yeah.
And if you're going in for your 8th win of the season, I think it's a different story. 9th win too, but 10 or 11, 12 even.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we go in and just crush them,
Yeah.
and that's the biggest key to it. So Before
think.
we, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I think like on my pros and cons for LSU are it's kind of the opposite of Florida. Like I've got very very strong feelings about some of their position groups, and specifically their receivers are really really good. They might be. This may sound crazy. They might be the best receiver unit that we play this year, like better than Bama's.
Hmm.
I think their D line is very good, um, but their O line was horrible last year. I think it's still going to be pretty bad. Uh, it's odd to say this about an LSU team, but I think their secondary is pretty bad. Um, and then when it comes to quarterbacks, if I had to rank the quarterbacks of the SEC teams that we play this year plus Miami, LSU situation is probably last or second to last in that group, and
Mm-hmm.
that gives me a lot more confidence that uh, you know they don't have a Joe Burrow or someone like
Yeah.
that, or even a good quarterback. Like I think they have a couple of average players, and even though they have good weapons, we should kind of dominate them on the like our D line should dominate their O line. I think our O line will hold their own, and I think we can score a lot of points on them.
No, I agree wholeheartedly. I think we this is a year that we beat LSU, and they're going to be a good team in terms of they're not just going to be a pushover, but I think we should be in full form by that point in the season. We've got the talent to overtake them. We're playing them at home. Again, if we're playing for a 10th or 11th or 12th win, I think we win that game, and it's not really in question. So,
Yeah.
before we wrap up, though, let me ask Alante's question to you, if you didn't see it. But do you think that the quarterback that ends up winning the job, um, whichever way it goes, do you think that impacts our outlook on the season?
I think it. I think it would affect the like the range of outcomes. Like I think with either King or Connor, I think there's a pretty high ceiling and maybe a little bit lower floor than with Max.
Mm-hmm.
I think Max may be more even keel, less likely to have a rash of turnovers and just have a clunker game in there where he turns the ball over 4 or 5 times. And not saying that the other guys will do that, but they might be apt to take some more risk. So yeah, I think it's all very like there's like the margin for error in college football is so great. Like
Mm-hmm.
if the ball bounces wrong one day, like you go from being an 11-1 team to a 9-3 team, and you're like, damn, like like this could have been our year, and we just kind of got unlucky. But that's kind of my take. I think Connor and King, higher ceiling, a little bit lower floor. I think Max, I feel pretty good about getting a 10 with Max, but I don't know if we could get much farther past that.
Yeah, I would tend to agree, but at the same time, I'm going to say, and I'll take Wigman out of it because I don't foresee him starting this year. I just don't.
Yeah.
Um, but to compare King and Max, I the pros and cons of either one outweigh each other or balance each other out to where, yeah, if I'm analytically looking at it, I would say, oh yeah, I would say exactly what you just said about, I think you have higher ceiling, lower floor with King than you do. Like let's say it's 12-0 to 8-4 with King, right? And
Right.
it's 10-2 with Max, right? But at the same time, I would say, if when you look at King and what's his pro? Well, his pro is that he's been in the system longer. What's his con? His con is that he's only played a handful of live games. Max's pro is that he's played a full season of live games with LSU. He knows what the SEC schedule is really like. Con is that he hasn't been in the system very long. So I would say those offset each other to the point that because I'm not at practice every day and I can't see what these guys are doing and I can't see what's going on in the decision making, and we're leaving it up to Jimbo. I would say Jimbo doesn't have a safety pick this year.
Yeah.
Whereas Mond, in a lot of instances, people would have considered him the safety pick. I don't see. There's not like the equivalent of a safety or of a comfort hire, right? There's
Right.
not a comfort quarterback. Even though we like to think that Max would be, there's a lot of issues with Max coming on. So to me, whoever wins that starting position gives us the best shot for the best season, quite frankly. And that's just because there's a lot of unknowns that we don't see because we're not at practice.
Yeah. And I think Jimbo definitely sees it that way. Like, there's no doubt. Like, he's not worried about ceiling floor. He's worried about who's going to win. Like, who's the best guy. Like who's performing the best. And it's hard to disagree with that. If at this point, if Max wins the job, that means he's beaten out King, who's had all that experience in the system. Who knows it so well and is has been improving. If Max can win, that means that he's just gotten that much better. If somehow Connor wins, like we know his talent, like that just means that he's mastered the system in an incredibly short time. And
that he beat out two
guy.
guys who should have beat him. So I mean,
right?
I think whoever walks out on that field and is our starting quarterback, I think gives us the absolute best shot. And I think either way, whoever walks out there is going to surprise us.
Yeah.
If it's Max, we're probably going to go in thinking like, oh, what's going on here? This is going to be another Kellen Mond situation. And I don't think it will be. I think it'll be better. And then if it's King, I think, we're like, okay, well, here we go. Let's see what he can do. Yep. So I think either way, we're good. If it's Connor, then it's like, what just happened?
Yeah. It's like, holy crap, we're about to have a Heisman candidate on our hands.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, like what better way to end the show than that?
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Alante. I always appreciate your questions and commentary. It really helps. Same with you, Pierce. You guys really, I really appreciate y'all's support of our podcast. We do it for y'all. That. Y'all are what keep us going on it for sure.
Yeah, that's a couple of boys from Camp Cisco back in the day. So I'm glad to see them hanging around and being involved. We definitely appreciate that. But and shoot, by our next episode on Monday, we could have a quarterback decision. I'm not saying that we will, but it's possible. It's possible we find that out pretty soon. And we'll definitely be on on high alert when that happens. And, we might even do an emergency show if that does happen. But
we might even do a tweet.
We might even tweet. But as always, we appreciate you guys listening. And we've got some exciting things in the works. And we're excited to share that with you all and look for some big things next week.
Yeah, definitely join us Monday at 7. We've got some big development to the podcast that I have been waiting on anxiously, and it's gonna be great. So join us at 7 on Monday. You'll love it.
All right. Thanks again for listening and enjoy y'all's weekend. We'll talk to you on Monday.